Evening and welcome once again to Gaming Under the Influence. I'm Mike here with Alex, coming to you from GreenDragonCVR in Woodbridge to talk about video games. How are you, buddy?
Oh yeah, I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Good, not so bad. Playing through Bloodborne at this time.
Ta-da.
Having finished Dark Souls 3. And
wow.
They're great games, man. You know, I was just telling you, when I'm done with these, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself.
Yeah, I can, like, I started to think about that, too, because I could see, like, what are you going to do, like, after this? That's going to be...
Play them again, I guess.
Yeah, right? Like, start all over, do different builds. I don't know. I feel like we both might be shoehorning ourselves into this obsession with these games where, like, other stuff just might not make the cut anymore. I was thinking about playing a ton of other games, and, like...
Me too.
The only thing I could think of was, like, I don't know if I can buy into it right now.
That's right, yeah. It's hard to inhabit that world and not feel like you're bored.
Yeah.
No, I just don't want to do it. Like I said this before, but other games when I'm playing, I'm watching the clock. You know, I'm like,
yeah, a little bit, right?
I kind of want to put this away. But this game, like 5 hours goes by. It's like 4 a.m. and I just can't go to bed. I want to keep doing it, you know?
I've definitely been feeling that lately too, for sure.
I don't think anything else can compare. But the Souls likes are good. I might play Blasphemous after this.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, cool.
But, you know, in the middle of Bloodborne, I found myself thinking there's something special about these. You know, I like to think of them as the middle era Fromsoft games. You know, the games between Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Dark Souls 2 on the one hand, and Sekiro and Elden Ring on the other. In between those, you have Bloodborne, and you have Dark Souls 3.
Dark Souls 3, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and they're unique games, I think, in the Fromsoft catalog in that it feels at this point like they settled into a formula. They nailed down like what constitutes their core design philosophies, and they were, you know, experimenting a bit in those previous titles, right?
Yeah, a lot of that sort of experimentation, I guess, would have been put away, and it almost like
the fruits of it, just, you know.
Yeah, they kind of had like solidified.
Yeah, they got the results they wanted, and they started to move forward with that.
Yeah,
and I think in Dark Souls 3, but in Bloodborne even more so, you see the most. I don't know. I think this doesn't exclude Sekiro. I'm really speaking to Elden Ring as a counterpoint. But I think in these games you see like the most refined version of FromSoft games, right? In that Elden Ring feels a little bit obese in comparison, you know?
Yeah.
There's a lot more to it. The space is bigger, and in some ways the design of the world is more impressive for sure. But I think in filling that world, you meet with issues that these middle era FromSoft games simply don't have. You know? They exhibit, I like to think of it as a proportionality or an integrity that I think Elden Ring, as amazing as it is, you know, I love that game too.
Yep.
It's not quite as proportional.
Yeah, not to detract, obviously, from Elden Ring, but at the same time, it was the first instance of a Souls game trying to fill an open world. So you would, I guess, see a slight drop in the quality that they're cramming into their world and how the lore works into with all of that, right?
You know, if we think about what makes FromSoft games, the Souls-like games, unique compared to other games, why it's hard to play other games after playing these, it's because, you know, I think what marks a game out as special is what the artist managed to build on the other side of the button presses and the visual representations. Like, what kind of world have you constructed? Like, what kind of universe is there for the player to inhabit? You know, is it interesting and beautiful? Is it full, right? You know, is it like an ocean or a puddle? You know, how much is there? Like, is it well thought out and logical and coherent? And I'd argue that FromSoft games are you know, unparalleled acts of world building. I think that outside of like select pieces of literature, you know, there's nothing like FromSoft games.
Yeah,
they don't exist.
100%.
In any other form. So they're unrivaled gestures of world building, and that's what makes them so incredible. And FromSoft has managed to allow the player to engage with these worlds via a combat system that, you know, now we all know and love it, right?
Yep.
It communicates these themes of, you know, the disposability of human beings to something outside of themselves very well. You feel like yourself, you know, being grinded up in the pursuit of the fictional and mechanical goals of the game. So we all appreciate that, but you get to this point when you're playing them that, you know, do the mechanics, you have to ask yourself, facilitate the communication of this world like they do in the best instances, or do they get in the way of that sometimes? Do they interrupt the world and its representation? Do they make it somehow questionable, you know, in its layout or its in its inner logic, right? And as I play Elden Ring, you know, when I stumble on a cave that has like the 4th version of a boss I've seen already, and he's so big that you're asking yourself, how did they get him through the door to this cave? You know?
To just start to see
through
through the cracks a little bit.
Just the coherence of the world evaporates before your eyes.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, well, of course, you know why they did it, to fill out this dungeon and give you some loot at the end or something like that. But the point I'm trying to make is this is contrary to the inner logic of the world. You've sacrificed not only the proportionality of the world, it's like, you know, a guy with an extra arm sticking out of his back or a nipple on his forehead, right? You're like, what is this doing here? It doesn't belong. It's not just my opinion. It's objectively, according to the logic of the world you built, this shouldn't be here, right?
Right, exactly.
You know?
There's just too much, and that's consequence of that design. You know, the series carrying over and up to the point where they made an open world game, and again, not to detract from it, but it's not as
proportional, and it violates the integrity of the world. The world now, its inner logic somewhat decomposes, you know, at least in those areas, right? Like, and they're easy to look past. They're minor little throwaway elements in an otherwise masterfully put together world. But the fact that you stumble on bosses like this Astel, this firstborn of the void, this giant alien god guy, you meet him in a super like theatrical manner in the main game in this underground city, and it's beautiful and intense. You're like, whoa, this is incredible. And then you just find him in a cave later, you know? And just
you're like,
that cheapens it so much. I just really wish they didn't have any caves at all. It would have been better without the caves, you know?
Yeah, that's fair to say. It seems that before they got to that point, you know, the technology was there. They were able to, you know, design their world and fill it, but not to the point of spilling over like in an Elden Ring, right?
Not just as a mechanical like a checklist that you want to stick in for the sake of making an open world.
Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 seem to be that it's like a bit perfection, right?
Yeah, I think
what you're saying.
I think here, like, the form fell victim to the matter, you know, to the genre conventions. Like the body has gotten too obese for the person whose body it is, right? It's got like just too much flab on it, man. It's bad for your blood pressure. You know what I mean? Like, it's not good. That's the kind of situation we got going on here. The matter, like the stuff you're doing, the mechanics, and even the use of bosses that appear elsewhere and have no fictional justification for being there. It's a violation of the proportionality of the thing and its integrity or its inner logic, right? And I think that's why, you know, again, as much as I love Elden Ring, I don't like those elements of it. And playing these games now, after having played Elden Ring less than a year ago, I'm struck by how those elements, especially from Dark Souls 3, they're totally absent. But in Bloodborne, what they do is something else entirely. You know, they managed to incorporate what was good about that stuff, the extra ability to test out your build on, you know, ramped up difficulties, and to, you know, after endgame keep playing for a while, and even to learn more about the world. Actually, the biggest secrets about the world you encounter in the chalice dungeons in some respects. So, what this has done, what they've managed to accomplish in Bloodborne, is I think what they were going for in Elden Ring, but without any of the problems with proportionality and integrity that we encounter in that later title. You know? Here you have the ability to dive for loot and to explore the game after you finish the main bosses, but not in dungeons that make no sense, you know, and then they're comical for how they stuff giant bosses into tiny little rooms, right? Like,
and at the end of the day, you warp into them from the hub world rather than having to jump on a horse and go, or just fast travel via the map. But, you know, again, that's just
the whole
open world conventions that maybe just don't need to be there.
No, they don't. But
which, I mean, that's no surprise coming from us. If anyone's, you know, listened to us at all, we've been critical of open world games from day one. And again, while we like Elden Ring, just to compare it to, you know, this other era of Fromsoft games where that wasn't even an option, and it's just I think they're stronger for that.
That's
which,
right.
You know, Bloodborne again, Dark Souls
for doing their own thing, I think, and not falling victim to genre conventions. At that time, they were operating purely in their own realm, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, the chalice dungeons. They've changed a lot, The chalice dungeons, like, you know, I was just asking, like, why is this boss here? Why would I find him underground? Like, they don't make sense, the caves in Elden Ring and the stuff you find in them. It's just incoherent. It violates the inner logic of the world. But in Bloodborne, a huge premise of the world is that underneath Yharnam, there's these ancient labyrinths constructed by this pre-human civilization, the Numerians, where in the first place they met that great one, Ebrietas, you meet in the main game. In the second, they found the blood that the whole game is about, right? There's huge fictional incentives on top of the mechanical ones to explore the chalice dungeons. And they do even have like a procedural variant of the dungeons that you can generate after you beat the main ones, which is something that I think Remnant from the Ashes turned into an entire game. after the developers play this, right?
True.
So there's that element of replayability too, but the mainline ones have almost the character of a properly designed level. They're obviously not as cool as, some of the set pieces in the main game.
Yeah, of course.
But each of the areas you go to, the different layers, which are supposedly built by different civilizations, they have a different look. Sometimes you cross big swamps and canyons underground. It's pretty cool stuff, and the bosses are amongst the best in the whole game, man.
Crazy.
So I feel like here they have that. If you're looking for that sheer mechanical satisfaction of diving for loot and fighting enemies in a repetitive manner that you can find from the Elden Ring caves, they've incorporated that, but without any of the detriment to the world building that you also get from that, and to even to the gameplay loop. Like, the hell is ruining the importance of a boss by redoing it, right? So I think in these middle era games, we see either Dark Souls, where they're just like, screw it, we're not doing it at all, we don't need it, which I respect too, straight up. That's awesome.
Yeah, fair.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And that one came out after Bloodborne. It's worth noting too. So they're not afraid of just
3.
Yes. They're not at all afraid of saying, we're just not going to make it as long. We don't care.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And Dark Souls 3 is a masterpiece in that respect.
No, you're not the first person to say that. So yeah.
But Bloodborne, I really think what it did is cool too, because the same incentives they had for including that stuff in Elden, they've accomplished it in Bloodborne without
an open world,
a detriment to the concept.
And it satisfies, like you said, that kind of gameplay fix where if you want to just jump in and just kind of play the loop without making progress, but instead of making progress on like the main story, you're grinding items and stuff because you're getting upgrade items, all kinds of stuff, and
making your way all the way towards more pertinent story bosses.
Exactly. So once you jump back into the the main game, then you could even bump your stats a bit, have an easier time in that, right?
And you'll also understand the story better because again, lots of the details about the world are in the dungeons, right?
It's like reading between the lines of the game. You sort of get a more of a perspective on what's going on, and again, you get that gameplay sensation where if you want to just mess around, grind, get some souls,
and it's
get
even
some loot.
remarkable.
It's awesome.
They managed to. It's not like there's a couple of bosses from the main game that you find in the Chalice dungeons, but the reason you find them there is because that's where they're from. And they found her literally underneath the city, right?
Exactly,
like, that's the whole premise of the game. So, not only that, but they have like unique enemies. It's populated by that Numerian civilization that's not seen in the main game. Like, they're just not walking around in Yharnam upstairs. They're just not
it's wild
there, right?
that they would do that, but
they're from the catacombs, and you find tons of different variants of them and unique enemies, unique bosses of so many kinds. It's really an impressive thing. How come how come you go to Elden and it's like, oh yeah, here's the same dude from up there and now he's in a cave. I know he couldn't fit through the door, but
but here we are.
By the way, it's too much a sacrifice of the world building in important respects for the sake of satisfying some meaningless gameplay convention. I think
that's absolutely fair to say.
Yeah, so maybe for these reasons, I'm strongly inclined to the view that like these middle era FromSoft games are amongst the best in their catalog.
So is Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 the best?
I think Bloodborne might be.
Bloodborne might be the
But I mean, I'm going to go play Sekiro, and I'm going to probably feel like that's the best again too.
That's true.
And I really don't think like all the things I said about these games, it probably applies to Sekiro too. Sekiro doesn't have any of the problems that you find in the other.
True. Sekiro was the most streamlined of the bunch. I'm sure we'll make a video on that once you get there.
It's the most refined of the bunch.
Yeah.
It's a real beautiful, incredible game.
I can't wait.
I probably would lump it in with these games in terms of its design philosophy more than Elden, actually.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I guess in that sense it is in this realm of games. So Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, and Sekiro.
At least, in its core philosophy.
These might be like the golden 3. Wow.
Yeah,
that's epic.
I'm curious to see what they're going to do after this.
Yeah,
their next Souls-like game, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, Armored Core was a hit, unrelated, but
they're not afraid to make shorter games, though. That's
exactly.
Right?
I have no doubt that they'll go back to making a Souls game that maybe isn't open world.
Yeah,
if they don't have to. Elden Ring was a big thing, and
even in how they changed from the Dark Souls games. especially the first two, were about waiting for your turn. They were almost turn-based, right? You wait for the enemy to do his thing, and then you got to free, and then you stands there, and you can do your thing, right?
Yeah.
These games, they don't really have those kind of like clear and free openings as much anymore.
No.
Now you have to get more inventive and string your attacks in between the enemy's attacks, or make sure you land close to them after their combo's done.
Yeah, it's a lot more
You always have to
dynamic.
be within range of taking damage, and the combos can branch off in different ways. So the combat to an outside observer may appear exactly the same, but it's changed significantly in terms of how you approach it and how you have to learn the boss fights, right? Even positioning becomes more important, right? So wouldn't it be best if they made an open world one without caves and with chalice dungeons instead, you know?
Yeah, that would be cool too. That's another,
that would be way better, right?
Yeah, that's
a bunch
fair.
of randomly generated dungeons, or even just normal, like, handmade dungeons with unique bosses and enemies. That would be way cooler.
Make a smaller world with a hub zone that you could still warp into and out of. Like, there's a lot that they could do.
Really,
I'm curious to see. Yeah,
I felt like the world in Elden Ring outside of the caves was very well done.
Yeah,
I didn't feel any of this sense of like repeated assets or tedium or anything like that. It's mostly in delving into those caves.
That's where like the line was drawn for you. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel that.
Like, I understand why it's there. Don't get me wrong. Like, but for that reason, maybe you just shouldn't have done the caves. I don't know. You know, take a Dark Souls 3 approach sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, you know,
less is more.
Less is more. So yeah.
Maybe we leave it at that. Play Bloodborne. It's amongst the best in the Souls-like games. And
absolutely incredible. One of the highest barriers of entry, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
But don't let that stop you if possible.
It's been out for almost 10 years. Can you imagine?
Don't even tell me about that.
Can you imagine?
I can't. It's horrible. Great game, though.
Great game. Thank you guys very much. Please play your Souls-likes, and we'll talk to you soon. Yeah.